coordinator for Superfest International Disability Film Festival, which absolutely is world-renowned. So welcome, you three. And I'm going to pass it to you, I think, just to give just a little bit more, if there's anything you'd like to add to your description. So Emily, why don't you take it away first? Give us a little bit of a description of you as well.
Hi, everybody. Nothing to add to the bio. Thank you for the kind words, Day. But I will just do a little visual description of myself. I am a white woman in my 30s. I've got pretty tight curly hair and big hair, and I'm sitting in front of on a couch in front of a gray wall. I'm wearing a sort of lattice white shirt and some wood laser cut earrings. And so happy to be here. Can pass it to Cheryl next.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Day. Thank you, everybody who put this together and all the folks out there attending. I'm Cheryl, and I got a little help from the team today. I am wearing a shirt that is maybe Barney purple, maybe eggplant, maybe a mix of the two. I am a white woman with olive complexion and big curly brown hair, and behind me is my little library of all sorts of intersectional disability culture books, and a sofa with some odd cat pillows on them. And I'll pass it over to Brenda.
Hi, I'm Brenda. Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction and for letting me be here today. I am a Mexican woman. I have long, wavy, dark hair. I have medium brown skin. I am sitting in my bedroom, and behind me is a dresser with plants and picture frames, a window, and my bed with a patch quilt. And I live in Santa Cruz, California, which is the unceded territory of the Ama Mutsun Ohlone people.
Fantastic. So shall we dive right in? So last week we had deaf and disabled filmmakers who talked about the need for greater inclusion and accessibility as individual filmmakers, right? They highlighted its impact on them as creatives and all their audiences. And we looked at some of the details of what accessibility looks like. Now, today, since we have folks representing more exhibitors, programmers, and distributors, it's going to be a little bit broader, right? We're going to talk about the philosophy of media accessibility, tips for advocating at your organization, how to overcome monetary, logistical, and technical barriers, and kind of creating an accessibility mindset, not just in yourself, but also in a way of encouraging commitment in others. And I'll be honest, I can think of no better place to begin than with Emily. So Emily, you know, Superfest really prides itself on modeling cutting edge access. And I'm wondering if you could just give a couple of examples of that, is what that might be for folks who might not have some idea of what some of the latest and greatest is, but also kind of what advice you have for film festivals or events that are just getting started. I mean, how do people learn more?
Yeah, huge question. So I would start by just saying one of the best ways to learn more is to attend Superfest. And this is a very shameless plug because today is the opening day of our festival. It'll be over the next 3 days, and its tickets start for free. So please join us and just learn more by experiencing it. Yeah, we've always prided ourselves on just really pushing the boundaries of like what access can look like by ditching any ideas about thinking about it as a compliance issue and thinking it much more as an art form that's about making this disability festival into, what some disability studies scholars have called a crip space that really is, built around the idea that people with all different kinds of disabilities should be able to feel welcome, of course, without having to sort of make some special accommodation and just participate. So for us, when we're in person, that looks like wheelchair seating that's in every portion of the theater, so that there's not this sort of like, oh yeah, sure, we have our 2 spots for our wheelchair riders, because we know that wheelchair riders like to come with other wheelchair riders, and some wheelchair riders like to come with 5 non-disabled friends who are going to sit in chairs, and we want to give a lot of options. We have typically a room where people who have sensory sort of overload disabilities can get a quiet space and just check out from the crowd, because film festivals can be really overwhelming social events. We have live captioning, embedded open captioning for all of our films, and audio description for all of our films. And that's a requirement. Our filmmakers, they theoretically know they had to check a box when they apply to the film festival that says, you know, we're not going to screen your film unless you do these features. But very often they don't have the budget for it, and Superfest steps in or finds external funders to help get the work done. And then, so that's just, you know, very quick taste of what we offer. It's always a process, always an experiment, and we're always learning more. Every single year, we've, you know, had people say, this was amazing, I could experience a film festival for the first time in my life. And we've had other people come and say, you know, you kind of forgot me. And we've had to learn from that. You know, for example, when I first started running the festival, we didn't think about seating for large patrons. And now we offer bench seating that allows, you know, any big body size to find a comfortable spot, because certainly when you're sitting through 3 hours of films, you need to be comfortable. And then just advice for other filmmakers. Well, one, we're out here and super happy to share what we've learned. We've learned it thanks to the generosity of our attendees, who just have been really patient when we've made mistakes and have, you know, guided us and said, here's ideas for what you can do to push it even further. And we're not trying to hog that to ourselves. We want to share that with anybody who wants to hear it. So please reach out to Superfest and you know, let us share what we've learned. And then just the other sort of advice is like, start the very basic thing, the most simple thing that every film festival should do is just an access link on their website. And that might mean that right now for your upcoming festival, you are dropping the ball completely with access. You have failed to do anything accessible. The least you can do is let people know. Let people know so they don't waste any more of their time digging around, trying to find out if the festival is going to work for them. You know, have an access statement and be honest about that. That's the bare minimum. And then, you know, it just starts from, I think one of the things from certainly the local film festivals that we've coordinated with, where we've done a lot to work and partner and host things. I know that what stops people is the idea of like, well, we're not doing what Superfest is doing. We can't offer everything audio described yet, or everything captioned, or everything with ASL. And, you know, by all means, that should be the goal. Like, people will benefit from it and you know, participate in your programs if you offer it. But starting with at least a few of your screenings where you're opening up, or at least that you're offering an accommodation statement that says if people want to participate, that they can make requests, and that you have some plan in place for that. That's sort of the middle grade where you can then start building towards doing an entirely accessible program, which really should be the goal.
Awesome. So people can learn more by talking to you. And so I guess you said the first thing really is to that kind of like have a statement that says, you know, our location is wheelchair accessible, or inquire if some of our films have captioning, or just something like that. Is that step one?
Yeah, I mean, step one also for film festivals is asking their filmmakers what they have available, because, you know, really often the films do have captioning or audio description, and they're not even asking their filmmakers about it. And so nobody knows. And then it's heartbreaking when that access work gets wasted.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know a key part of that and the way Superfest operates is that it's very much tied tightly to the community, and it reflects that idea, you know, that film is both, you know, it's never passive. It's both a part of a community. And I think part of that phrase that comes up with disability has always been that nothing about us without us approach. So how do your efforts, do you think, kind of demonstrate that? Yes.
I mean, that's core, but I'll also point out the irony of me advocating for that as a non-disabled person. In this world, I'm the only person at Longmore Institute that doesn't have a disability. we just think it's incredibly important to center the work on disability expertise. So our juror panel is 100% people with disabilities. And it's just such an important step of the process to recognize that, even if maybe we could get more exciting film professionals, because of the prestige and the hierarchies that already exist in film, we just think this is a place where disabled people get to fight back against the many representations that have circulated around disability that are just so harmful and wrong, and make sure that disabled people are the ones making the final call about what makes for a good film to represent their lives and stories. But that's built into the the judging process, but it's really all throughout. We have a very grassroots approach to our festival where typically when we're in person, we ask people from local disability rights and justice organizations to introduce some of the films, and that gives the audience a chance to learn more about some of the local tie-ins that connect to a film. And those are all disabled people as well that we're bringing in. Our panelists we're looking for 100% people with disabilities, or occasionally there's filmmakers who haven't made or don't have a disability, but we're really making sure that they're the folks who've done their research and aren't just trying to kind of continue a cycle of staring at disability with cinema, but really doing the work of telling the right stories.
I love that. I think that's such a great point that's come up a lot, particularly in documentary filming, about how sometimes filmmakers are very extractive from communities. And I think the other great point that I love, that fact, is you talked about having jurors with disabilities be a part of the process. And I think that would be another kind of thing that any festival could do, was make sure that the folks they have making some of the decisions are a diverse mix that reflects the community, that includes disability as well. So I love that. So I love the fact that you pointed out the irony as like the one non-disabled person at Longmore. So which also means it puts you in that lovely position where we can then ask you all the ally questions too. Sure. Because it's a word that gets thrown around, and there's people who go, I want to do the right thing and I want to be an ally, and it's not a being, it's a doing. And I think you've given us some great ideas for that, and I will be coming back to you for more on that specific point. I want to tweak a little bit more on the idea of some of the features. So I'm going to slide over to Brenda, because last week the panelists talked about access features, which I think Emily hinted at, but the same thing was about not leaving them as an afterthought that gets added on at the end. And folks talk about captions and audio descriptions, and I love the fact that it was brought up, it's not about compliance with laws. I actually want to know, how does New Day Films as a distributor approach accessibility in film differently? I know that's super long.
No, that makes perfect sense. And actually, I think that I would love to invite Cheryl when she feels like if she has something to add to that, because she really has been a champion for access and captioning in New Day. But I think that in terms of access, I think I'd like to explain a little bit more what New Day is about for people who are not familiar with the co-op. So New Day Films is an independent filmmaker distribution co-op. So we're a collective of filmmakers. Most of our films are documentaries, but they're all social justice related. And the main market for us is educational spaces, so universities, colleges, et cetera. So, but the other thing about it is that all filmmakers are member owners, which means that it's like a democratically run co-op where we make decisions about, from pricing to standard features that our films are going to have. About who comes in, et cetera. We run the co-op. So we are in a very unique position to shape a lot of things, right? Because we are the filmmakers that are also running it. It's not like you just give your film to a distributor and they do what they feel they need to do to take it into the world. You can make the decisions over how your film is watched, who's watching it, how you want it to come across into the world, which is really powerful. But then, you don't have diversity around that experience, then a lot of those decisions are gonna just be, not taken into account. So one key thing that, if our membership becomes diverse and intersectional in their experiences, then you're going to have richer expertise into, first just membership, but also, right now Cheryl and I are part of the steering committee. So we are in leadership positions where we can shape and push for some of the decisions that are made. And I think Cheryl has made amazing strides in really creating, increasing the culture, the collective culture around access. So in terms of that, it's just really big, because it's really shaping a group of filmmakers and educators. It's bridging that. This is what we offer to educators. So it keeps on pushing for educational institutions to provide hopefully provide the necessary technology so that students can also access the films that we have.
Awesome. So Cheryl, I was wondering if you have anything to add to that, because I know the two of you work really closely.
We do. And what I want to first add to that is thank you, Brenda. And that I want, my addition to this is to put it back on Brenda and ask you if you would talk about the way that you have folded accessibility into the equity and representation policies and practices and changes that you have been spearheading at the co-op, because I think that's one of the major differences between New Day and other places you can get films. Yes, ADA, we've got captions. Lots of people have captions, not everybody yet. But what stands out to me about the work that you have done with the co-op is how you wrap it into equity and representation. So may I throw it back to you?
All right. Okay. It's just gonna, it might soon turn into a love fest, because I really have so much admiration for Cheryl. But I think something that just things that have been happening with equity and representation is that we lately we have been thinking about outreach, right? When we're looking for filmmakers to join the co-op and to become part of New Day, it's just, it's not a separate thing where we go like, all right, so let's do outreach and just find great films and filmmakers. And then, but you, equity and representation, you go look for diverse filmmakers, right? But it should not be that way. So equity and representation is leading outreach now. So we can intentionally find filmmakers that really connect to different aspects of equity and representation. And really what that translates it into bringing just different skills and then pushing us to be more up to what's what we need to have right now. I don't know if that's what you were referring to, Cheryl, in terms of finding that their membership should really be diverse and intersectional.
Yes, and you do that, and you do it so beautifully. Yeah, she warned it was going to be a love fest, and everybody gets to witness. But you have embraced accessibility for the filmmakers and for the audiences and for the content that we have in this way that often doesn't happen. The disability activism and disability arts worlds still are quite predominantly white, especially at the organizational level, and so there's our racial justice initiatives, our captioning thing. And you have always, from the get-go, considered access and different access needs as completely within the equity and representation work, and that it is part of racial justice and gender justice.
Yeah, I think something that Cheryl's mentioning is that we're trying to push for decentering the co-op, which really what decentering means is that, we move away from what has always been the center of knowledge, the center of the standard way we do things, what seems to be acceptable or professional, or, this is going to be very good in the classroom because it has these requirements. But instead, we're trying to shift from that center. And when we do that, we find where we connect in different spaces. I always think about how always, with Cheryl, we usually connect in terms of like how captioning can be so culturally incompetent, right? And so as someone who was born and raised in a different country, captioning was one of my best teachers when I was in English. I'm still an English learner. And it's always something that, of course, captioning was not meant, that's not the original intention for closed captioning, but it really is a testament that when we decenter things, we can we can reach people and spaces that we didn't even consider, right? That they were not intended. So when we start decentering, we start seeing all those points of intersection, and then it becomes like, all right, we're moving towards racial equity, yet we're experiencing another awakening as a culture, right now. As we're trying to move towards that, it can be collective, it can be intersectional, and really with film, there's a lot of spaces like that when we start decentering education and film.
Awesome. I love this, because normally when people have talked about this, you always hear it talked in the context of an individual filmmaker or an individual film project. So do you guys have a good example of maybe a policy or a process that you guys have incorporated into New Day to kind of take this beyond the one person to actually more of an organizational type structure? Because I think for many type organizations, associations, or even filmmaker collectives, there's a question of how do we make this from that kind of perspective? And I'd be real curious on some of the steps you guys have taken.
I can think of one concrete example, and that is image descriptions for social media posts. So first of all, I am not the first person at New Day to come in and push for deaf and disability access for access's sake or for equity. There are some really incredible leaders who came before me, primarily disabled filmmakers, but also some accomplices. So, but it was for a while still more kind of like an individual endeavor. And so I'm not on the marketing team, I'm with digital operations, but I joined the marketing team and started writing out image descriptions and explaining to people how they work and the ways in which you can post image descriptions in an inaccessible way, and they still don't work. I trained a bunch of people and continue one-on-one to train different people who come onto the marketing team, because we rotate our work positions at New Day sometimes. And so I've been training people in how to write image descriptions, talking to other people at New Day, and improving my own image description practice in terms of being culturally responsive and creative as well. And it's really blossomed. We now have it on all of our social media posts, and we got it on the blog. And I think that our eBlast newsletters also now have alt text embedded in the pictures, which supports a lot of people who are blind or low vision. And if you've got crappy internet and the pictures don't load, boom, like Brenda was saying, it's the curb cut effect. A lot more people can also benefit from it. So it really serves in that way. And I've noticed when I first came on and literally would scream and cuss, people pointed out later, well, that was a lot of F-bombs, which I didn't notice I was doing. But when I first joined, I would cry and I would yell and I would go on and on about, you guys, this access is not good enough. We need more, we need more. And I have noticed over the years being with New Day that I'll reach out to people, even filmmakers, members of New Day who I haven't met yet, throw out an access thing to them and people go, okay, sure, I'll do that. And I think a lot of that also is because of Brenda wrapping it into equity and representation, so that it's not just me always talking about it. It gets talked about across departments and at every meeting. And I have seen the climate change around that, and that people just say yes a lot more readily than before.
Awesome. So this one actually is for Cheryl, right? And we've talked a little bit about New Day's approach to accessibility, and I think you've talked a little bit about your individual reaching out to filmmaker members. And as we know, change is never easy, right? So I hear the both of you got individual members and what you've been doing with some of the processes. So clearly, like you said, this has been going on for a while. So what are some of the kind of like lessons or challenges and opportunities actually that New Day has found in the past few years to address access? And honestly, how does that connect to the industry at large?
Cool, yeah. So one thing was a change that I saw in my time there is acknowledging there are filmmakers with disabilities. Like even that simple step of acknowledging it goes really a long way. And so, you know, it's easy to start to imagine deaf and disabled audience members, very easy to imagine them as subjects of documentaries, or that somebody might be a parent of someone with a disability. But that's another shift that I've seen over time of constantly identifying proudly with whatever language you want to, and in whatever way that you might be part of this community that is not just good for making films about. So that's one of the things that's come up. I'm looking over my notes. One really neat opportunity was that New Day Films, it's exclusive. So when you want to do educational distribution through New Day Films, that is your educational distribution company. You don't go to others. However, we do allow within our contract that if you work with the DCMP, that's the Described and Captioned Media Project, I think project is the word. That is a project that will caption and audio describe your film for you at no cost. The return is that they can distribute their film. And I believe it's K through 12. And New Day made the choice to say, yes, we're exclusive in the educational world, which includes K through 12. However, if DCMP does the access for your film, absolutely, you can distribute with them. And it's a really great opportunity because then the filmmakers are not having to pay for that feature. And then it also increases the audience, and it increases the audience that has access. So that's a big one. And the last thing I want to say at the moment is that we built an actual structure over the years. So it's not about, New Day has an annual meeting once a year where we do the business of the co-op. And it's not about the night before sending someone an email, oh crap, can you make sure to have such and such? That'll help me participate. We have a structure in place. It is not up to an individual person to go beg to get what they need. And access is not just deaf or disability access. There's financial access, transportation access. Of course, now the transportation part was cut out of our annual meeting process. Yeah. But we think about that too. And so in terms of the disability stuff, just in the past I don't know how long it's been there, but it's getting better every year, is that we have an access coordinator. And that person's job is to check up and make sure that access needs are being met. And we are working to not call them access issues. That one's harder. That's a one-on-one conversation I have with people all the time. Who's got access issues? Nobody. I'm not a burden. I'm not having an issue. The issue is if I ask for something and you don't provide it. So I try to get people to reframe it as access needs. We send out a survey in which we ask people, what are the things you need to best participate? We don't say, what's your disability? We want to know what your access needs are. And we offer some options, and you can write whatever you want. And then the access coordinator will get back to you and find out and let you know which of those things we can meet. And we work together, and we all work together to meet them, whether you are a person who needs that access or not, such as scent free. When we were meeting in person, we had a scent free policy. And so we actually, the co-op, invested in scent-free shampoo, conditioner, and soap, I think, and distributed it throughout the retreat center to support people, because scent-free shampoo can be expensive and hard to find. And so that's fine. Come to the annual meeting. take a shower, get scent free. So we build it into the structure. Now I'll stop there.
Awesome. Ooh, so now I have one more then for Brenda, which is totally related to this. So Cheryl gave us the picture inside New Day. So Brenda, in your role, addressing that equity and inclusion, how would you say that you guys can take that, what you have learned and what you are doing, to the industry more broadly?
So that is, I think, something that I really want to make very, very clear is that by no means has New Day, like, we're here to say, look, this is how it's done. Wouldn't that be great? But rather, like, I think I would love for this space to become a place where we really get a lot of good challenging questions, and we can all connect to find solutions together, because I really feel like the nature of New Day as a co-op really speaks about that potential to kind of intertwine a lot of shared needs that we have around equity and representation. I think that a lot of there's a little bit of a contradiction, right? When we have this independent filmmaker sort of feel, right? It's independent. You do things on your own, right? But then you're part of a co-op, but then you're trying to sell your films individually and market them individually with a lot of help from other people. So it kind of like navigates this, like straddles this line of like, yes, we're independent, but we're here because we want to work collectively. So I think that is, I would like to think of it as a strength, because then as filmmakers, we get to make those decisions and have like the collective power of bargaining, right? If we have an agreement with an institution, we can together advocate, right? For me, the film that I distribute in New Day is a really small film that didn't make like huge waves in the industry. Nobody funded that film. So for me to have like an Emmy Award film, Emmy Award winning film next to me advocating, right, for the same contract is just amazing, right? It really speaks to the power of the co-op model. So in that sense, I feel like why not apply the same thing to every aspect around who's behind the camera, and what's how do we, the films that we get, because we try to represent different styles of filmmaking. Some people come to New Day with their films, they were funded and they had this nice pipeline, but some of us didn't, right? So when you get a filmmaker who struggled so hard to make a film for so many years, literally went into debt or just so much, and then they arrived to New Day, without that financial support, that career sustainability, the thought of making their films accessible, it feels like something that they've never heard before. So it really needs to start that being at that moment in the pipeline. It really gives that perspective of, okay, we need to work from every aspect of filmmaking, at the very conception of development of a film, all the way to the classrooms, to make sure that is contemplated in every step. And it really has to be, it sounds super like, I don't know the word for it, and my Spanish and my English are fighting right now, but really it's kind of idealist, but it's just, we just have to have everybody at every step of the way really having access and embedded in what we do.
Well, gosh darn it. I like Brenda and Cheryl, you guys have ruined my next question. Because, and this is a question I know that comes up all the time, but I have a feeling from your last answer, we kind of know what it is, because people always ask, well, whose responsibility is it to insist on accessibility? And like, is it the filmmakers? Is it the exhibitors? Is it the funders? Is it some combination, of all of these people? Like who's supposed to do this? And I think that's the thing people ask us, who's supposed to do it? Because most people would simply go, that's not my job. And I think you guys kind of answered that a little bit already. So I'm going to actually pick on Emily, although I think I know her answer. But I really think because it comes up so much, I want to make sure that we really just hit that one hard about, well, whose job is it?
I mean, if you say you think you know my answer, it's because it's the cop out of everyone's job is to advocate for it, right? Yeah, no, I mean, certainly, I have sympathy for filmmakers when I know how tight the budgets are in the filmmaking world and grant making, but it is really frustrating some years when we have filmmakers who've had their film accepted. We tell them that, this access work needs to be done. And they're like, well, that's up to you. Our film is done. And I'm going to steal a line from Cheryl, who said at last year's Superfest, I believe, she said, your film isn't done unless it has these access features in there. So, filmmakers really need to be responsible for this work. And it's an incredible opportunity. It has happened several times over the years at Superfest where filmmakers have built this in for the first time and then have said that they see their film in a new way due to the process of the creative process of having to think about language and work with audio describers to put into words the visuals that they use. Why did they use that visual? Does it matter? And what language might you use to describe it? Or some of the films that we've had, the audio description adds this richness to it that they end up saying, I like that version of my film better, and I'm going to use that moving forward. But I also think it's absolutely up to film festivals to be responsible to their audiences, not just their current audiences, but their potential audiences to offer access and do that work as well. I mean, as I think I mentioned briefly before, there's sometimes where the film is already accessible, but the film festival doesn't even ask for it or use that version. And so it doesn't matter that the filmmaker has done that work. And then, lastly, it is just really disheartening how few filmmaking grants there are out there to support the access work. SF Film now has one, which is really exciting. And there's a nonprofit called Women of Her Word that does charitable audio description funding, but there's just way too few opportunities. And so that's, again, why I have some sympathy for the filmmakers, because they're like, well, I can write in this cost and this cost, but people don't even know what this is. So it's just hard to get it covered, and doing it right. Audio description in particular really does have costs associated with it that can be hard for a filmmaker. So yeah, I mean, I think everybody, and I throw audiences in there too. I think a lot of people have kind of given up on film festivals and don't even go because they're used to them being institutions of discrimination. And, get back out there, ask for it, because I really think certainly we have seen that the other festivals are talking to us more and wanting to learn more and taking on, offering more access. And same with the filmmakers. I've been so impressed when just in the 8 years that I've been in this position, we, the first few years of the festival, we had to do almost all of the audio description work. And then now, filmmakers like yourself, Day, and Cheryl, who both had films at Superfest, who were like, we've already got it made for you. And others who just said, I don't know what that is, but I'll do it. And it's just been so wonderful to see that cultural shift starting to happen.
Do you think more festivals could or should maybe require it? Or do you think more, actually maybe general film funders also should line item this? I mean, I'm giving you their easy yes ones, but I'm really kind of curious on that, because people always get twitchy when you say require, but at the same time, where does that sit then?
Yeah, no, I mean, I absolutely do. And I think these changes aren't going to happen overnight, but, certainly the major film festivals that are reaching huge populations, when 1 in 4 people in this country have a disability, their audiences are going to benefit. There are blind, deaf, hearing impaired, and people with other disabilities that, also need to, this is not a film issue, but a festival access level issue. They'll come. If you build it, they will come. And then I think the thing is just putting the word out when it has happened, because one thing I have heard is people are like, well, we tried it once. We offered audio description and nobody came. It's like, did you tell people in the blind community? Did you make partnerships with blind organizations to put the word out that that's accessible? Because if you didn't, yeah, nobody came because they've given up on film festivals. And that's just really disheartening.
Absolutely. Cheryl, I think you told me a story about this the other day.
I have no memory of anything in general. So you will have to tell me what you mean. But I did want to weigh in to build on what Emily was saying. But what did I tell you?
Sorry, no, as I lose it completely there. No, I think it was related to the idea of filmmakers and the having it accessible versus not, and knowing whether you've done it or having it done more than once.
Oh, yes, that I can speak to that.
But please make your point first, though. I'm like, let's not lose it.
No, right. I took notes. For once, I remembered to take notes. You had asked whose responsibility is it? It is not the audience's responsibility to insist on accessibility. That's how, so whose is it? Not the audience. And I think that's at the beginning, in the intro to this panel, it was talked about changing the mindset of accessibility. And that's one of them. So yes, I'm a filmmaker, but my primary work is as a captioner, a subtitler, an audio describer. So I am constantly in conversation with filmmakers, mostly independent filmmakers, who might say something like, well, I'm not going to have any caption users at such and such event, so I don't need the captions. Well, have you polled them? So I think, and no, we don't know who's coming to an event until they get there. And you still don't know who's the caption users in the audience and who's not. And so changing the mindset of accessibility is that you assume that there are going to be people in your audience who are going to want and benefit from the access that you can provide. You can't provide all the access in the world to suit everybody, but whatever it is that you are going to provide, and like Emily was saying, advertise it, assume that somebody is going to show up who wants it. She just said, if you build it, they will come. Even if you don't build it, they're going to show up sometimes and be like, great, that would have been so much better if I knew what they were saying in that film, but I couldn't hear it. And so whatever it is that you commit to doing, always do it. And I have been in many conversations where I or someone else asked somebody, hey, are you going to have captions, for example, at the screening? And the response is, can you fund it? We'll do it if you can pay for it. Or do you, that sounds interesting. And they'll always change it to subtitles. Are you going to caption your film? We could make subtitles. Can you tell us where to get money? No, that's not my job. When I come to you as the audience member, I am very disheartened by that. It doesn't happen that often. So that's that answer. But the other one, the story. So I have described a few films for Superfest and also for another festival. And sometimes I have received titles from the other festival and I'll write back and say, I've literally seen this film already with captions and audio description. And they're like, well, but they submitted to me the one without captions and audio description. I'm like, email the filmmaker and ask them to send it to you. And sometimes they do. And I was about to endeavor on 2 weeks worth of work and that somebody was going to pay for, and they had already, we talk about how tight funding is. Why are people paying for this stuff twice? I understand on the major platforms with TV shows and major films, you might get captions and audio description on one platform, and when your license expires there and you want to broadcast on another platform, they won't take the previous access, and you got to commission it all to be done again, which is utterly redonk. It's just so redonk. But it's happened with several films, and what ended up happening this year is that I described a film 2 weeks ago, and then I just went to the Superfest site to look at the program and saw that film is at Superfest, which means it has been described because it's at Superfest. And I'm sitting here like, oh my gosh, does this filmmaker even know that film has been described twice? Is anybody in communication with that filmmaker? Wow, somebody paid me to describe it. It's already described. And why is it that somebody would submit an inaccessible copy of their film when they've got the access features in place?
Yeah.
mind blown. That was the story, right?
Yeah, it's the one because it still kind of shocks me. I know we're running tight on time, and I want to make sure we have a chance for any of the questions. But we actually had one question from last week, which I think is a super powerful one that I want each one of you, if you could just give a quick answer to before we get Jason back, I think, with the questions, which was, and I'll start with you, Brenda, if that's okay. What is one thing that folks who aren't filmmakers, whether you're activists, audiences, or allies, can do to move the needle forward?
Tough to be the first one. But I think thinking about something Cheryl shared the other day with me, the idea of interdependence. Approach everything with that interdependence and not really stop compartmentalizing things and really look at it, decenter it.
Awesome. How about you, Emily?
I love that answer, Brenda. I also, I hate to ask people to have to advocate because I know that it's exhausting and people are doing it so much already because the world's still so inaccessible. But I just think from the work I do, working with filmmakers and other film festivals, I know that they need to know folks are out there wanting to attend their programs. So just sending an email that just says, can I come? Is your event accessible? Like, will help them remember there's real people out there that want this. And this isn't about, worrying about being sued. This is about like real people in your community who want to experience the amazing films you're sharing.
Awesome. And Cheryl, one thing.
I would say that I'd bring it over to the accomplices to do that work. So even if you don't ever need captions or audio description, if you see a film screening advertised on Facebook or whatever, drop a comment in there. Will this presentation be captioned or have ASL interpreters or audio description? Just ask it. Don't get into a fight if they say no. Just ask it. We've got to get it out in the public more. And if you do know about these access features, go ahead and dialogue about it. But just start with that question.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So I don't know if we have a moment. So Jason, I think you were going to pull up some of the questions from the Q&A.
Yes, thank you very much, Day, and to everybody. This has been such an amazing panel. And I just wanted to note that we don't have the chat open, but the Q&A is open. And so people are also commenting at, kind of how useful and helpful everything that the panelists have said so far. So thank you very much. This first question comes from Maria Jose Garcia Vizcaino. I teach audio description in Spanish and English at a university in New Jersey. And I always talk to my students about the importance of cultural aspects in audio description. For example, when describing film characters, one trait that may be relevant for Anglo audiences may not be relevant for visually impaired Latino audiences or vice versa. I wonder how New Day approaches audio description in English and Spanish in the US, where Spanish-speaking populations are significant.
Can I start with that one?
I was gonna say, you just told me about this yesterday. So
I did? I don't remember.
That's okay. Go what you're gonna say, because I bet it's exactly what I'm thinking.
Oh, okay. Well, I would start by saying that because New Day Films it's a self-distribution cooperative, the organization itself is not dictating how people do their access. And you have to have captions. That's a basic requirement. Brenda and Judy Leaf and some other people are working to expand our list of audio described titles. But as it stands, the organization is not making those kinds of decisions. So it's up to each individual person. I don't believe that we have any titles yet that have the audio description in Spanish, but I can tell you that where I come from is 100% in line with what you're saying. The story that I told about describing a film and not realizing that it was already described, that's unusual. I am almost always in direct communication with the filmmaker, producer, people in the film, and I'm talking to them about what it is that they find most relevant in the film. Other than this rare situation, I always provide the script and ask people to give me feedback and to correct it. And I tell them, I need you to make corrections to the things that I might have missed, or the vocabulary that I use that is not helpful or not appropriate or just wrong. And so hopefully that kind of speaks to what you're talking about. I'm excited and hope that you will reach out to me because I would love to talk to you more. And I would recommend that people check out Read My Mind Radio, REID. It's at readmymind.com. Thomas Reed, how could I forget his name? He is the producer and host of this phenomenal podcast. He's blind and a lover of audio description, and he interviews people all the time, users of audio description, audio describers, and he goes deep talking about culture and the importance of having culturally relevant, culturally respectful audio description. And he will be on the panel at Superfest tonight. Shameless plug for Superfest, starts tonight.
I was about to ask Emily to plug that at some point today.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think, and maybe it wasn't you, someone had given an example, and I think it was actually about captioning, and they talked about the use of a word, and the Spanish was what was used in Mexico. And they said, but the meaning of the word was very different than for someone who spoke actual like European Spanish from Spain, and that actually made a difference in the meaning of the film. And I think that reinforces, like you said, why the filmmaker should be a part of it. And I know Emily referenced the fact that this is a creative element. You can't just punt this and have someone else just make it up, because things like that. And I love the question from folks, because that is it on the head.
And don't get me started on budget captioners. Oh, listen, I a lot of my work is recaptioning. So, independent filmmakers, oh my gosh, my budget is tight. If you get budget captions and you want caption users to have the same film that non-caption users have, you will have to pay to get them recaptioned. And the big one was, there was an Indian American filmmaker who came to me basically in tears. She's like, is this just me? Because I think there's a problem with my captions. And she got them done by a budget captioner. She made the film in India. She's Indian American. She went to India, made a film in India. And every time the music came on, the caption said exotic music. And she was in tears. She was so hurt and so offended, and rightfully so, because that's just grotesque and exoticizing. Also, how unuseful. Was it fast? Was it bouncy? Was it celebratory? Was it pensive? Like how useless to caption users to not even describe the style or the vibe of the music. But she came to me, she's like, am I being overly sensitive here? Because this just hurts me. And I'm like, no, you're right. It's not exotic music. So I worked with her to come up with a term that she liked better. And I remade her captions, which had hundreds of other errors. But that one in specific, she told me what words she wanted in her music captions, and we put them in there.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much. This next question actually is coming from Mark Hallett. Starts off by saying, this is a fantastic presentation, and then asks this question. So at my organization, we've taken baby steps, but have so far to go. One question, do you know of any good examples of event registration where questions around access need to be included? Also, a separate question is whether you know of any good resources specifically on image descriptions.
I could take the event registration and then pass it to Cheryl for the audio description resources. So I think the big shift to look for is like just the language. Somebody actually else pointed this out in the Q&A chat about, do you say reasonable accommodations, which kind of immediately puts the idea out there that lots of people's accommodation requests are not reasonable and doesn't really scream, we want you at our festival, rather than say, we welcome people with all disabilities at this event and look forward to working with you to figure out how to make this accessible, so that you're, just saying you're open to it. I'm happy to share Superfest Access website, so you can see, we would typically link off to it, because I'm also aware of the challenge with event registration where you're trying to keep it concise and you don't want to overwhelm text, but this stuff is so very important. So our strategy is typically like put it in a link and give people a lot more detail somewhere else.
Emily, can I ask you one question? So when we were actually putting this event together, it was recommended to us to have somebody actually go through and audit our registration page before we made it live. Is that something that you've seen before or you recommend?
Yeah, I think that's great. We do it ourselves, even though, we've been doing this for a long time. We still will send it to somebody else, or we're lucky to have lots of friends we can ask, but if not, there's a lot of disability organizations that will happily consult and for a fee to support you and make sure you're getting your stuff accessible. I mean, websites make it so easy to bring access, and yet, so many people aren't even using the access features that are built in. One thing that I would add that's really disheartening right now, when we were figuring out how to do our festival online, I did some research looking into a lot of the online platforms that people are shifting to, and found that, I found one that was a maybe, but almost everyone I looked into was not screen reader compatible. So that meant that even if you've got audio descriptions in your films, blind, vision impaired people may not even be able to access the platform to experience it. So that was disheartening.
Thanks for that. And then this second question, which you mentioned, might be best answered by Cheryl. And I know that Matt also sent a note about a resource for audio description, but Mark's question is just for any good resources specifically about image descriptions. Cheryl, if we could have you come back on.
I wish I had one. I don't know that I have seen a comprehensive one. I wonder if Day can answer that one. Isn't that funny? A lot of us end up reinventing the wheel. When I was training the New Day folks on it, I made my own style guide because I wrote it in a way that was most specific to New Day. I got 40 hours of training in audio description, and so it's in my head. I don't think that I'm the person to write a best practices guide, but I haven't seen one. Day, is there one?
I'm having a moment going, audio description or image description?
I think Jason said image description.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The Perkins Institute for the Blind actually has a very short little blog post just about doing a short little image description, and it's done very nicely. And they're one sentence place to start. They go, have you ever been looking at your phone and you're looking at a photo and somebody leaves and go, oh, what's that a picture of? And you answer. That answer is often a great start to an image description. So you don't want to overthink it too much. I never thought of it that way. Someone leaves and go, oh, what's that? And the answer most people give is probably a pretty good start for an image description.
I like that. Yeah, I think with the image description, the same as my audio description, after I finished my formal training, I'm not done. I listened to Thomas's podcast. I listened to what audio description users are talking about that they like and don't like. I am part of an audio description Facebook page, and I read what do people want and not want? What is hard? What is easy? What is fun? It should be fun and entertaining if the show is fun and entertaining. But I think, really also taking a cue from Brenda and the work Brenda does, it has to be fair. It has to feel equitable. I see a lot of beginners start with there's a person in a wheelchair and another person. Well, what's the other person doing? Why did you call out somebody being in a wheelchair and then somebody's just a person? And I see it all the time. What did I see in this training I took on accessibility? It was something like a young woman and a man. Well, wait a minute. Why did you give me some indication of her age and not of his? So we have to make sure that we're not picking one type of person as the standard and then everybody else is that, gets a descriptor. Either everybody gets descriptors or nobody gets descriptors. And that's really boiling it down a lot, but you have to think fairly about gender and ethnicity and disability, and you just have to think broadly and nuanced.
Thanks for that. Thanks for those answers. So we have a few questions that are maybe more technical about captioning. So I'm gonna just, there's like two here that are kind of around captioning. So I'll ask this first one, and then we'll stay in the caption space. So we have closed captioning, but also separately provide CART, so real-time captioning. Can you explain or describe how adding CART helps versus just the closed captioning?
Sorry, mute. Emily, would you like to take that one?
Sure. So CART would be for live programming, where you don't know what somebody is going to say. So you, and then, you know, it really is best, and maybe we should let Cheryl do her rant on the problems with auto captions, because I've heard it and it's quite good and quite accurate. But you know, captioning in films is like you're writing it in advance, you're building it in, and ideally offering it with open captioning. So, you know, it's going to be the perfect version, hopefully, because you've had time to write it in advance. So if a film program needs to have both, it should have captioning that is built into the films, and then CART so that any introductions, live dialogue, anything like that is also accessible.
Thanks, Emily. And then one more question, particular to captioning. So in the realm of captioning, is there a particular standardized format in terms of appearance for captions that panelists would recommend or that they require for filmmakers? And the first part of this, the comment here is, to Cheryl's earlier point of instances in which someone utilizes image descriptions but does not format them in a way that they're actually useful. That's kind of the context for this question.
Yeah, and this is Cheryl here, and I turned my mic and my camera on without Day even before the question was done. So we have FCC, Federal Communications Commission guidelines and best practices, which were co-written by caption users and non-caption users. But then you also have needs and desires and wants by caption users, which are as different and variable as any other. I lost that sentence. It's just like anything. There's different, people have different tastes and styles. So some people feel like if you've just got, you know, just this blocky text at the bottom, that feels separate from the film and it doesn't feel integrated and it feels like an afterthought. Some people like to animate the captions or move them or put them in different colors. So there's a lot of interesting thing, and there are some deaf filmmakers who do interesting visual things. But the easy answer is they have to be readable. None of this white lettering with no background. I've been to film screenings where I couldn't read the captions because you've got like white text, somebody's got a white shirt on. There's no, the captions are gone. My preference is a sans serif font, like clear and readable, over a fully black box, dark gray. That just makes it the most readable. And I understand it does make it pop off the film and not feel as integrated, but it's the most readable. And any filmmakers out there, your speaker identifications and other text, when you put it here, the captions overlap. And I always have people tell me, your captions are overlapping my speaker IDs. And I say, your speaker IDs are in the caption area. And sometimes they, you know, wink and nod back to me on that. Often they get very angry with my attitude, but it's true. I can move captions around the screen, but if you put your film on Vimeo or YouTube, they're all going to pop down to the bottom. Now, Emily was talking about open captions, where the editor embeds the captions onto the film. If you do that for an exhibition, which you should, you can move the captions away from graphics and text on screen. But again, if you do it as closed captions streaming, they're going to bump down. So I lost track of even what I was talking about. Black box, make it readable. Don't put words that go all the way across the screen. It's not easy to read. I like to do, if I do a 2-line caption, I like them to be basically even. You know, the long line and then one word, it's hard and exhausting on the eyes to bounce back and forth. So I try to make them tidy and centered and just the easiest to read as possible. And hopefully I answered what you were looking for.
Awesome. This question is for Brenda, and Brenda, maybe you can talk a little bit about the challenges that you've faced kind of embedding accessibility as a concept within equity. And I think that is ultimately when the Access Reframed team speaks about this work, and what we ultimately want to happen is we want people to think about all these things as a collective and not separately. And I was wondering maybe if you could speak about that.
Sure. I think part of what you said that spoke about earlier, it's definitely kind of the short answer is like, okay, it's everybody's responsibility, and then we're at the end of the pipeline, so if you don't come with it, good luck. But that's just absolutely it's unacceptable. But at the same time, the big challenge is precisely that we are at the end of the pipeline in a process where accessibility was not brought into ever, and it's really easy to just like say, oh, the filmmaker, like, or really like, oh, the new day, how could you ask for this? Like, but it really, I think there's power at every stage, from conceiving the film all the way to people in education. But I think the key to this is like, there's definitely power, right? It's a whole different thing. So at every step of the way, there's spaces and organizations that do have that power. And what I mean by that is usually like, either social capital or financial capital, right? So then it really has to, we often think, how can we work with everybody at every step, right? From funders to filmmakers to festivals, all the way broadcasters, and then obviously with educational institutions. Where is the money? Where's the decision making? Who are the people influencing things? So it really, I think that has been the biggest challenge. So we're trying to think about how right now we see the opportunity that we have as being kind of in this two worlds of education and film. And a lot of our member owners are educators. So really feel like that's also an opportunity to bring accessibility into the classroom, but also that filmmakers can be the, creating knowledge, right? Because often you think about the filmmaker and there's a certain type of filmmaker that people might think about, of a certain gender and of, certain things. And we really need to hold that space and make that space in the classroom, but also in the filmmaking space. So we're hoping that we can create, perhaps in the future, we're working towards a possible fellowship where we can find those people at every stage of the pipeline that can give the funding for the filmmaker, right? So sustainability, which is a systemic issue for filmmakers to make their films accessible. So that can be worked out. So filmmakers can be like, all right, here is the funding, but also the mentorship. Who knows about accessibility at the highest quality, right? Like how, getting that mentorship so filmmakers really change their practice and then from then on become filmmakers who put accessibility at the forefront. So there are opportunities, but also the challenges, right? As I mentioned. So we're taking, steps little by little, but there's definitely so much work to do, and it's not just us, it's collectively, and that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you. And Dave, feel free to jump in if you want to ask any questions. Where there's maybe just one or two more that are actually listed. So if you have anything that you want to just jump in with.
I have one that
Yeah.
I think is that has been twitching for a while. So, COVID-19 has really changed the world for all of us, right? But one opportunities that you've seen come up because of this shift to the virtual realm, and what does that mean kind of for disability filmmaking and programming? And I will poke at Emily because it's actually, I know she's the one who has brought up this question multiple times before.
Thanks. Superfest had not done an online program pre-COVID, but the Longmore Institute, which is the host of Superfest, had been doing online Zoom programming because we know that there's people who want to attend our events, and even if we make them chemical sensitivity, aware, people will, they'll have to ride this streetcar to get there, and somebody's going to mess that day up for them, or folks who are in a bed and can't participate unless something is online. And so when shelter in place first hit, and we're in San Francisco, so we were one of the very first places to shut down, we saw it as this really exciting opportunity to kind of show off and really be, Alice Wong has talked about disabled people as the oracles who have like articulated what we need and nobody listens. And I think this was an example of that, where we're like, oh, we know how to make this pivot happen. Let's do it and show off what we can do. And it was really exciting. It worked, and it was an important moment to bring people together at a time where discrimination was, very rampant and everywhere, around conversations around who's ventilator worthy that were just heartbreaking. But what was really exciting for us is we didn't just bring together our core community. We brought together totally new people all across the country who the idea of like a disability film festival was totally unthinkable to them. And that was just so wonderful to get comments from people who said, I've never been able to attend a film festival of any kind before in my life, and that this was the first one. So these were like little mini showcases we did. And this weekend will be our first like fully online festival weekend. And while, there are a few things I will miss, I'm going to miss hearing the room full of laughter when there is a film that screens at Superfest that has like insider disability humor, and everybody gets it, and the filmmakers will go, finally, somebody really got that joke, and like, or the hissing that happens when somebody says something like so discriminatory, and everyone in the room is like, yeah, that's happened to me, I feel that. And so I'll miss that moment. But I also am just so excited for what the online program means for bringing the festival to people who have never been able to experience it before. And also, bringing it back to the access conversation that we've talked about, for me as the access coordinator of all this stuff, it's never been easier. We have always had a challenge that we're working around at Superfest because we love to sort of highlight the audio description. But there are people who audio description, while it brings access for blind, vision impaired, it creates barriers for them. People who have like sensory disabilities or migraines, it can just be like too much information to take in. And so every year we've kind of experimented with like, we'll have this screening open audio description, and we'll have a separate screening room for closed audio description. And then we'll swap it around. And like, it's just an experiment that we're always playing around with. And this year, knock on wood, I don't want to jinx myself like hours before the festival starts, but it's just so much easier to be like, here's your link for open audio description. Here's your link for closed audio description. It's a choose your own adventure experience. Similarly, like, you're going to have a chair that's really comfortable for you because you're in your own house. And just sort of that option just means that the festival in a lot of new ways will be more accessible than it ever has before. So I really encourage festivals that are thinking about doing access, like, now is the time to experiment and make it happen.
So I'm going to pick on you just a tiny bit more. Sorry, because I think one of the key big points you make is because all these film festivals have gone virtual. In many ways, folks with disabilities who may have had transportation or other issues can actually now participate in ways they couldn't before. However, the other thing you point out was not all these platforms are accessible. We have some other access needs. And I know you put together a marvelous guide with some tips and hints on how folks can do that. And I don't know if folks want to put a link to it, but if you could just give us just a few of the key things that you have learned that you're saying, all right, guys, if you're going to do this stuff in a virtual environment, to ensure that it is more accessible, because guess what? There's going to be more folks with disabilities participating. You know, here are like just a few things that you really need to pay attention to, because you put it together and I love it. And I think it's one of the best ones that's concise and clear, and it's not like 20 pages that nobody wants to read.
That's super nice you say it's concise, because I think it's like 10 pages, so I'm not sure it is, but yeah, totally. Yeah, we'll happily share that. It's using Zoom as a platform, which you know, I think one of the things that's interesting, a lot of folks are using these nice platforms. They are aware of that now they've lost low-income folks who don't have reliable internet connection. And that to me is such a great example of that curb cut effect that we've talked about, because at Superfest, we're like, actually, we're good on that, because all of our films are audio described and we're using Zoom. So we can also provide a call-in number where all you need is phone. And I know there's some people who don't have a phone either, but you know, that is a huge additional population that we can reach at all of our programs. People who may not have a vision impairment or be blind, but who can participate in the festival by hearing that description. So it's almost just like listening to a really exciting radio film festival. But some of the other access features, oh man, I say that we showed off by doing this online festival really early on, but we also made a lot of mistakes. And then every time we'd get the hang of something, Zoom would do some update and then it would throw curveballs in. So it's been a learning process, and I just want to express gratitude to all the people who helped us learn it. But yeah, so we just wrote up that document and have been sharing it with other film festivals and organizations across, well, beyond the US, because so many people were kind of in this like, how do we figure it out? And it involves things like that we're modeling in this presentation today, trying to not have more than 4 boxes open at a time. The more boxes you have, the tinier and tinier the interpreter box gets. We have amazing support from Rebecca, who's been spotlighting each of us. And that means that people who are using a phone or a Chromebook, which have a little bit limited access, they're still going to see the interpreter and see the presenter speaking at the same time. It means not overly using the chat. We made this mistake. We like early on, you know, we talked to one person who said chat was accessible for screen readers. And then we said, where are you all coming from? And then had like just 100 answers, and all the blind people were sending us notes like, oh, please don't do that. I'm not going to be able to catch up and listen to this program because my screen reader is going to be catching up telling me where everybody's coming in from. So we've moved from chat, we shut down chat and moved that conversation into the Q&A. But, you know, it's an unfortunate thing because I know so many people are like, oh, the fancy platforms, but like Zoom is working. You can run your festival through Zoom and reach a lot more folks.
Awesome. Thank you. Cheryl or Brenda, does either of you have anything that I'd be curious about your thoughts on COVID and how it's impacted things that you think with regard to programming and distribution?
Wow.
I know.
Yeah. What I will say to kind of dodge that question is there is a group in the UK, Together Films, and they have put together this incredible, huge series called Digital Perspectives. And you can find it on the website crowdcast.io. And you can go back and watch the old episodes. I do not know how accessible these episodes are in terms of captions or interpretation. I was not part of making them, but I got to be on a panel about accessibility with Andrea Levant, who ran the Crip Camp Impact campaign along with the late Stacy Milburn Park, and Andrea completed that. But we talk about access, and it was really nice that they brought us on. Hopefully, access doesn't stay as just like a one-time topic, as Brenda has talked about. It's just kind of embedding it in everything, in all the conversations. But they're doing an incredible job of answering that question, Day, in terms of what can filmmakers and exhibitors and distributors do to get caught up in this now basically fully digital landscape and keep having successful film festivals and thriving filmmakers. So hopefully people can make their way to crowdcast.io and look for Together Films. Again, I don't know what the accessibility is like of those recorded seminars.
Fantastic.
As far as for me, the only thing that I would like to add is like tremendous gratitude for everybody. I've been learning so much, and having this opportunity has been amazing. But just going back to what you said about COVID, I think personally it's really opened up a lot of doors for connecting with other filmmakers. Like personally, as part of equity and representation and the work that I do. And I know there might be some filmmakers in the audience today, and I really want to take this opportunity to ask them to please reach out. I would love to have a one-on-one with you and see if New Day is a good option for you and support your distribution for your film.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I think one question that we've seen come through in the Q&A is just simply how to contact all of you. And I would imagine it's going back to websites and different things, but if you want to pop on for a second and describe or explain that, how somebody would get in touch with you, that would be helpful. And then if everybody's cool, I'm gonna close it out after that. So maybe, I don't know, Brenda and Cheryl and Emily, if there's a way. Oh, there you go. Emily just threw her email into the chat.
I'll answer verbally because I don't use the Zoom chat for the most part. It's too hard for me. But my website is whoamitostopit.com, and my contact info of all sorts is on there. Also newday.com. I'm on there, same film, Who Am I to Stop It? You can click a little button that takes you to a Google form that then gets sent to me. So going to whoamitostopit.com is a faster way to find my contact info.
That's great. And Day, what about you?
Oh, I guess I forget. So the easiest actually for me is Day Al-Mohamed, which is DAYALMOHAMED @gmail.com. Or actually, I'm a founding member of Forward Doc, which is Documentary Filmmakers with Disabilities. And that's actually probably an easier way to find us. And there's like 140 of us. So if you're a filmmaker with a disability, come hang out with us. And that's fwd-doc.org. And that's actually a great way to connect. And I think a lot of the folks that you see as a part of this program have been in and out of the Facebook group and hang out, and we all basically work together to kind of move the industry that we love and are so passionate about, and the media that we really are passionate about and enjoy, so that way more people can basically engage and be a part of it. Because I think at the end of the day, that's what we all want to do, is share the things we love.
That's a wonderful way to wrap this up. So thank you so much to our moderator, Day, and our panelists, Brenda, Emily, and Cheryl. We really appreciate you joining us to really help us reframe and kind of just rethink the way that access in film and media is considered. We're very grateful to have our two ASL interpreters, Sheila Kettering and Patty Shore-Caden, as well as Tina Dillon from the Dillon Reporting Services, who's been providing the real-time captioning for the event. Thank you so much for attending. We hope you enjoyed this, and we hope you're gonna walk away with something that you can do yourself, in your community, in your films, in your filmmaker community, at film festivals. and just helping us to continue to move this needle forward on ensuring that accessibility is always a part of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Now, Jason, the video of this, it'll be available eventually, yes? So where can folks find it, and where can they find the last one?
Absolutely. So Sophia just dropped in the link to Full Spectrum Features landing page for this for Access Reframed, and we already have last week's conversation up for you to watch. Yeah, and this week's we're going to do some light editing on it, and then we're going to put it up hopefully by like earlier mid next week. That page also includes a ton of resources from the panelists here as well. We're just trying to collect all these different resources, best practices into one place for people to be able to access that.
Right. So please do share that broadly, because one of the big things about any of these kinds of webinars is it's great for all of us who are here and a part of it, and those of you who absolutely, I appreciate it. But the not so fun thing is think about all your colleagues and people who you work with who were not here and who don't usually think about it. And guess what? This is that opportunity to be able to share some of those resources with them and kind of make sure we all can level up at the same time. So please do take advantage of that.
Day next, we're going to plan another panel, hopefully with you as a panelist, talking about policy and advocacy next time, because that's the next step, right?
Absolutely.
Well, thanks so much for coming, everybody. If you registered through Eventbrite, you'll receive a follow-up email with those links, as well as a survey. We would very much appreciate you filling that out. It helps us kind of understand how we can do these better and other topics that might be of interest to folks. And I am wondering if I can just ask everybody, I know this is like more than 4 panels, but we're just going to be waving. If we could just have everybody come on real quick and just say goodbye to the audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Go to Superfest tonight.
Tonight.
Tonight starts tonight. Thank you, everybody.